We often say, I just don't have enough time, when in reality, we have the time. We just didn't proactively carve it out.
So you're about to watch part 2 of why planning is the most underrated form of self-care. This has been a long-awaited episode because we actually recorded it as one whole episode, part 1 and part 2, back in September of last year. And then we went through our wildfire season, which you can hear all about in this video here. We did still have part 2 of the self-care episode that we had recorded, but we hadn't edited it or gotten it ready for the podcast at all, and now it is ready. We get into some things that I think providentially we had talked about right before our wildfire season. If it sounds like you are jumping right in the middle of the conversation, it's because you are. So if you want context, go ahead and jump back to listen to part 1 so that you have the context. Then you will be ready to hear everything in part 2. More than ever, the world needs kingdom-oriented women who have their priorities straight.
But in the day-to-day, managing all the roles and responsibilities God has entrusted to us can feel overwhelming. It's easy to think there simply isn't enough time for everything we need to do.
This podcast tackles that challenge head on because we know that God has promised to give us everything we need for life and godliness, and that includes enough time. I'm Shelby.
And I'm McCauley. We designed our planning method to support the growing movement of Christians taking radical personal responsibility over every area of their lives.
The Evergreen planning method takes the prep work you need to do to achieve your most life-giving goals and streamlines it into a simple 15-minute planning session each day.
We're here to teach you that method. So grab a cup of coffee and let's talk. In reality, we have the time. We just didn't proactively carve it out so that we could build on these larger goals, what it was that needed to happen in our day to just slowly work towards, like Shelby said, what direction you're trying to go with your family, with your personal life, and things along those lines. Having space to seek the Lord and delight in Him and learn His scripture, or having space to move your body and exercise, or to steward the temple that you have and you're responsible to steward. And sometimes we get so overwhelmed by these large plans, these large goals. I want to get fit. What does that mean? But in reality, there are ways, and we teach this in the Evergreen Planning Method, to carve out time to focus on these individual goals. But it's about being proactive with your time rather than every night falling asleep and just feeling so, overwhelmed by the fact that I just didn't do the things. I didn't do what I wanted to do. Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I do that? You're just thinking about the things that didn't get done, when it's true that taking, 5, 10, 15-minute planning session will help you move this needle forward on all of those things that you're really wanting to implement into your day-to-day life, so that you can look back and say, wow, I'm living what I want to be living. Wow. And it's not as overwhelming as you might think it is.
And it really does take some deep thinking and really abiding with whatever problems that you're facing. You brought up fitness, and that's been a thing, that I've kind of struggled with and tried to figure out in my own life. And it's not enough for me to just borrow the typical cultural, like, I just need to lose 10 pounds situation. I had to sit down and go, okay, what's going on? And that takes time.
Yeah.
That takes deep thought. And I sat down with my planner, and I would try to, okay, let me work out a week rhythm where I'm fitting in this type of exercise. And then I try it and it doesn't go well. Well, instead of just being like, like throw my hands up in disgust or double down and force it to happen anyway, I needed to step back and say, okay, this is what happened. I tried this exercise routine and I crashed at this time of the day. And I actually used my time blocker to help me really analyze what was going on, because I would do this exercise routine and then I have it in my time blocker and then I would crash. And then I go, okay, I should have felt great after that, not
terrible because it's supposed to be the right intensity and all this stuff. And so I like look at it, figure it out. After a while of using my planner to literally chart out what's going well, what's not going well with my fitness, I finally figured out it wasn't that I wasn't exercising enough. I actually ended up needing massage therapy in order to move my lymphatic system around. And that was my own personal thing that I needed to figure out. But if I had just been barreling forward, never using my planner to like micro journal and reflect on what's going on to try to get in touch with what's happening with my body. Basically, it's just this was a very specific application for self-care for me. If I hadn't taken that time to reflect, then I might have just gotten angry with myself and started punishing myself through harder and harder routines.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we know that's just going to it's going to damage my hormones.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll lose weight. Maybe I'll pack it on because my body goes into a stressful, response to that. This was with my own health. I needed to stop and just figure out what's going on. And I ended up going to get weekly massages, which is such a stereotypical self-care thing to do, right? And sometimes we can like even, like snub those things as so
of course,
shallow.
you're getting a massage.
Yeah, and so silly. But as I was deeply researching these things, trying to understand what was going on with my own body, I actually realized that would be a very wise and therapeutic move for me to do. And so I tried it, and you saw the transformation.
Yes,
It was really funny. It was within like 2 or 3 weeks, people from church started going, what are you doing? Are you exercising a lot? Like, did you just do a new routine? Are you on a diet or whatever?
Change your face, your posture, all the things.
Yeah, and all it was is that I just needed to figure out specifically the kind of route I needed to go with my own health in that season, and it was massages. So I just want to validate that is something. If you're feeling the need to really double down and understand your self-care, do not overlook that. That's a big deal. And that had a huge impact on my hormones. It had a huge impact on my postpartum recovery. All the things, because I took the time to figure it out. I didn't punish myself through more intense trainings and all these different things trying to lose weight. I just said, okay, I've got to research this. I've got to figure it out. I've got to make space for this aspect of self-care. And I ended up being able to get a health transformation that I needed.
And as a quick segue, when you brought up massages, I did want to mention we both do planning as our form of self-care, but we also have a prompt on the layout of our day page for self-care, because we do think it's important to do the massage, paint your nails, whatever it is that makes you happy in this sense. We're not trying to belittle those things as well. We think there's a place and a balance for all of those things. So when we were teasing about the massage, it's just because we've heard that, idea that don't do those petty things. We think there's just a place and a season for all of them.
Absolutely. And it's celebrating the fact that God has given you this body, and it's a good thing. He created our bodies very good. And so when we steward our temples well, it's an act of celebrating the good gifts he's given us.
You can ask Shelby. I'm all about the fun, glamorous things to just play in my day and my downtime, dyeing my hair or cutting it, get bangs, or, try new nail things. So it's just all a lot of fun.
And honestly, it is a sweet way to show up and serve our families as well. I notice every time that I put effort into my appearance and put on a dress, I walk out and my son is like, Mom, you look beautiful. Mm. And there's just like a different tenor to the day because I'm showing up with some intention in the way that I'm taking care of my body. And I think that helps the children to understand, hey, we're going to have a good day here. And I notice them standing up a little bit straighter, or my daughter going and brushing her hair again, and it, I that's another thing. We're setting the tone for our families and honestly bringing a little bit more sunshine into their day when we did these things.
Yeah, and you mentioned the whole problem solving with your health and trying to figure out why it is that these simple exercises are affecting you this way. And I love how you mentioned pulling out your planner and writing out the details and all the information you have inside of our planner, our day page. We have micro journaling prompts there, and we also have your lessons and victories. And I feel like this is such a great way for us to really process what it is that we're trying to do with our life as a whole, because every single day, it rushes by. I am so shocked by how quickly the days just fly by, but actually taking some intentional time in each day to reflect on how you're feeling, what you're thinking, where the Lord has you in your walk with Him, where He has you in your relationship with your husband or the people, the loved ones that you have around you, and being able to put some of these words that are in your head on paper. So you're micro journaling, you're writing your lessons, something you've learned that day, some of your victories, and you're being able to really process through how you're feeling. I feel like this is a big one for me. I want to just kind of rush past these, but it actually changes the way I approach my day when I've taken time to write down what I'm grateful for, or I've taken time to really grab hold on a lesson that the Lord is teaching me in that day. And it doesn't have to be a long 30-minute study. Sometimes I just don't have time for that, but I am able to get quiet with the Lord and figure out, what is it that you are prompting my heart about right now. And I write that down in my lessons. And then I also write down a victory, usually from the day before. And as you continue to do this, you are seeing your real life on paper. You are seeing where you are and how you're growing in maturity, and how your kiddos are growing. I'm sure that they'll make it on that page, how your husband, your relationship with him, or the loved ones around you, your mother, your friends, and you're seeing yourself, you're kind of like giving yourself almost an accountability as you're trying to live the life that you're running towards, whatever your calling is, whatever these goals, seasonal goals that you have are. You're kind of writing down a little bit of accountability there to see if you're moving towards the direction that you're trying to go with your time.
You talked about days flying by so
Mm-hmm.
fast. Have you ever noticed that when you take the time to maybe journal a little bit about looking into your son's eyes, or you take a minute to journal about something really sweet your husband did and how he really does care for me, my goodness, that the next time that you have an opportunity to relish that moment, you do a little bit more. You know, you,
Mm-hmm.
you actually, it helps you to slow down without even realizing. Like, it's almost like you're kind of training your subconscious, like, live in these moments.
Mm-hmm.
You used to pray for these moments to be here, and you're living in the moment that you prayed for. And I've had the experience with, the more that I use my planner, I actually feel like life slows down
Mm-hmm.
because I am way more fully present in what's going on today, because I've actually trained my brain to care about the time that's happening right now,
Mm-hmm.
not just be living in the future or be worried about what didn't happen in the past. Or it helps me to be rooted in, okay, right now, here I am living a real day right now. This is my life happening right now. Right now, I'm experiencing a memory that I'm going to think about when I'm 80 and wish I was living in, right? I'm going to wish my child was this age and I could just talk to them again. And that kind of helps me to slow down and see the time for what it is, the gift that it is. The present is such a gift.
I absolutely love that point. And I really think that that is the key to gratitude, really. That's why the Lord commands us to count our blessings, to give Him credit for all of these beautiful things that are happening. And that's why gratitude completely reshapes our perspective around whatever moment that we are in. And I love how you mentioned noticing your son's eyes or the things your husband does for you, because that's a form of gratitude towards the Lord and the blessing that He has given you with the relationships that you have. And that is huge. I'm going to actually have that as a takeaway from this particular episode, because I do need to slow down and notice these things even more with my family and my day-to-day life.
It makes me think about in the Psalms, the Psalms talks a lot about the blessed person, right? And we know that blessed means happy in Hebrew. And the blessed person is present and is worshiping the Lord and grateful for the things that God has given them. And so even the scriptures just reaffirm this concept of just slow down,
Mm-hmm.
meditate on the goodness of God and his kindness towards us, worship him for that, and you will then be happy. And can you get a better form of self-care than that? It's amazing how when we align ourselves before the Lord and are worshiping Him actively in heart and mind, and we are not just seeking to glorify Him, but also to enjoy Him
Mm-hmm.
forever, as the
Yes.
Catechism says. When we are truly seeking to enjoy Him and we are there and we're seeing His benefits and His kindness to us in the moment, that's what that's real happiness.
Yeah.
And this is what separates a Christian version of self-care from a worldly version of
I love that.
self-care, because this is how someone can experience true joy in the Lord even if they're in a crazy hard situation, thinking Paul and Silas here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Singing from the shackles. And we know stories of Christians throughout history. It's not that Paul and Silas were like, "Oh, I need some self-care, I'm going to sing a hymn." No, what it is that they were just slowing down and going, instead of panicking and saying, "We've got to get out of here, the gospel's not going to go forth, oh my goodness, what's going on," kind of just freaking out and reacting. Instead, they were saying, "Hey, the Lord is present in this moment too. He's
Mm-hmm.
got something going on right now. I'm just going to slow down and I'm going to worship Him and thank Him for His goodness while in this experience." And their joy caused them to sing. And of course we know the rest of the
Mm-hmm.
story, and how the chains fell off and the doors flew open and the jailer ended up being converted, and his entire family, God did a miracle through
Yep.
this experience, through Paul and Silas just slowing down and saying, "God's here in this moment and we can be happy." And that's really the heart behind this episode and behind what we're talking about with self-care. No, they didn't sit down with their evergreen planners in the jail or anything like that, but it's truly about presence before the Lord and stopping and saying, He's here in this moment, He's doing something, and I'm going to be aware of it. And the planner is just a really helpful way to map that out in very tangible ways, very grounded in what's actually happening today, what's happening this week, and contextualizing it in our lives where we can understand and move forward practically in terms of those things. This really leads into the next point that I wanted to make, of helping us to process and let go of disappointments that we have throughout our day when we're sitting down and using our planner. You talked about the lessons and victories section. I really love that because I'll reframe a lot of times something doesn't go the way that I planned, the way that I wanted. Maybe I make a mistake. Maybe it's a moral mistake that I make that I need to repent of. Something happens that's difficult. Taking time and using my planner and just writing down in the lessons prompt what happened and what I learned from it can reframe it and help me realize that this is not just like, "Oh, well, that's a miss, and too bad that happened. Now a bad thing happened," and it kind of encoding it that way of something that we missed out on or some disappointment that happened. Instead, I can think of it in a future because I'm sitting down with my planner, right? So I'm in a future mindset, and I'm going, okay, this happened. I don't want to do that again. Why? Why did I lose my temper? What led up to that? Yes, sin, and I needed to repent of that. But what led up to it where I could have stopped before we got to that point? And I can realize it. I keep scheduling meetings at an inopportune time of the day. And so, sure, I was culpable for the sin of being impatient with my kids. It wasn't the meeting's fault. But at the same time, I'm learning from and reframing it and looking at the future and saying, I'm going to continue to be a mama and an entrepreneur. My kids are going to continue to be needing me in the morning, and I am going to continue to be scheduling meetings. And so a simple reframe tells me that I can be proactive, can take personal agency here, and I can schedule meetings for a time that works better for all of my roles and responsibilities. And so I like to use my lessons space for helping me to think ahead for what's going to work out and be peaceful for everyone.
I love that point because honestly, planning as a form of self care is really important for, who you want to become in your future. And so being able to plan for your future self by aligning today's choices with who you know you're trying to be. What you know, your weaknesses, you know your strengths, you know your goals, all of these things. And so being able to be proactive in your planning to give yourself a framework to work with, that's helping propel you towards this person that you're trying to be and the life you're trying to build. So thinking ahead as you're aiming towards who you want to be next week or next month or next year, the next 5 years, is it's actually very relevant to think about those things today and to build on what is working, fix what's not working, and build new habits that help move you towards that person that you're trying to be, the future you.
Yeah, and this really is, like we said at the beginning of the episode, what planning is just proactively solving problems for our future selves. And it taps into something called episodic future thinking, which is just a fancy way of saying that you're mentally rehearsing what's ahead. And when you engage in this type of thinking, you can start to just see the potential challenges before they happen. And you can start to envision, here's how things could go right. And here's how things could go right, and here's how I can avoid things going off track. And you begin making smarter decisions today that really line up with where you're trying to go, who you want to be. And this process doesn't just help you to start feeling more prepared, which of course is, the mental peace and clarity that you were talking about, but it also fuels your motivation to go ahead and take those next right steps, so you're not like slogging forward exhausted and weary with all the work that has to be done, but because you have taken this time to engage in planning, which is just taps, like I said, into that episodic future thinking, which we're wanting to do a whole episode on episodic future thinking. This is a really important concept. It's kind of sciencey, which is, right up my alley.
Yeah.
And there's so much to say about that. But, this process is fueling your motivation. It actually taps into the motivation part of your brain to where you actually get excited about taking the next right steps, even if there's something that you would typically maybe be a little bit like, oh, this is mundane, humdrum, I'm gonna have to do this work. Like, no, when you sit down with your planner and you can see A to Z, you can see this beautiful picture like what I'm doing right now. I vision boarded what I want for our homeschool space, and now I'm doing the decluttering and the organizing and the moving stuff around. And it typically that kind of detail work, because of my personality, is something that I don't really enjoy doing. I would really rather be working on big fun creative projects. But I'm actually able to, with using my planner, tie this to a big fun creative project, which is creating a beautiful homeschool space for my children, which just contextualizes all those little mundane things that I have to do as just, okay, just get through it, because look at what I'm creating for the children. And I can engage in that episodic future thinking. I see us there in just a few weeks, sitting down and enjoying morning basket with the chalkboard that I have hung on the wall, and I've made them some chalk art, and I have some fresh printables for them, and we're cracking open a new read aloud, and all the things that make our homeschooling so beautiful. And they've got their shelves lined with their homeschool materials, and that when I can picture just 2-3 weeks ahead, it helps me to stay on track, get this thing done, move through it, even the hard parts, even the boring parts. And when I'm planning this way, I'm not just going through the motions either. I'm being able to connect what I'm doing right now with the future I'm working towards, and also how I want the children to have experienced these couple of weeks where we're creating the homeschool space, not me shoving them in the room and telling them to go watch something so I can just get this done for them, with that attitude, but instead, hey, come help me, like you were saying earlier. And we've actually had some wonderful experiences. Today David was walking around and measuring everything with the measuring tape, which, by the way, is totally a homeschool lesson.
Yeah.
And he's asking me, is this inches or centimeters? And he's, measuring all the things. Like, that's totally something he would have done a worksheet would have told him to do and he would have experienced from a workbook. But he's doing it just organically because I've engaged in this and I've said, this is the kind of future I'm moving towards. Not only this beautiful homeschool space, but an experience with my children, creating this together with them where they have ownership over this homeschool space we're creating. That has cultivated a lot of rich ground for these beautiful things to grow out of. And I'm getting to delight in this process right now that would be very easy if I hadn't taken this time to be proactive and intentional about it and cast the vision for myself. I could have just blurred these next 2 weeks and just been like, we've got to get through this. And it could have been a very frustrating next 2 weeks where I felt burnt out and stretched too thin. And my kids, were also feeling like we just wish that these 2 weeks were over so that everything could get back to normal. Instead, we're being able to actually enjoy these moments as a family because these moments are also a gift from the Lord.
I love this. This is how I learn so frequently. Shelby just basically gives me terms for certain things that I have been doing, and I didn't even realize this. What is it called?
Episodic future thinking.
So in my day-to-day life, I've actually set a goal for myself to get up earlier. As some of you know, I am not a morning bird, but I do know that there's a few extra hours in the morning I could utilize, and it took a lot of quiet downtime to picture what I want these mornings to look like and to give me a framework, of how these mornings could go to be successful, something I could actually keep working towards and something I could actually sustain, right? And it's really interesting because I have been for the past 5 or 6 weeks now been getting up earlier on certain mornings, not every morning. I have my first half of the week and I can do an extra work block, but because I did this episodic thinking is what it's called.
Episodic future thinking.
I have been able to now not feel like I don't want to do this, but instead look forward to these mornings. And even I have a plan for tomorrow morning. If we stop recording our podcast early enough, for how I can use this time that typically I would feel it would feel like a chore to have to get up. But instead, it's something that I enjoy. I'm actually, write this day on the calendar, right, Shelby?
Right.
Something I actually can look forward to. And I know that it is propelling me towards how I want my life to look by utilizing these extra hours in the morning.
That's really a big deal because you being able to unlock your motivation to get up early, just knowing you, and it just has so much to do with just how you work, how you tick, right? I mean, she is a workhorse, guys. Like, it's not like she sleeps in because she's a lazy person at all. She doesn't even sleep in that much. It's just more so of not getting up at the crack of dawn and getting right to work, right? But and she's always been more of a night owl type, and there are night owls, and night owl is valid. But I think it's pretty amazing that you were able to shift to that and get motivation to have half of your week where you're a morning person getting things done. That's a pretty incredible shift, and I just never really expected that. But it's it's differences in our personalities, but it's because of this episodic future thinking.
Yeah, it really
works.
Because honestly, I even told myself, I'm only going to shoot for 3 days a week. I'm only going to shoot for 3 days a week, and that's what I've been able to be consistent with. And then I still have on the other days of the week my slow mornings, because honestly, the reason I love to have more slow morning sleep in the morning is because my kiddos join me in bed and we cuddle and everything's just perfect. And that is honestly like what I dreamt of as a child. I want to have this big family where we're just all in bed and they're drinking their bottles and I have my coffee, that kind of thing. So it's not that I'm having to give up that, but instead I'm recognizing that there's about 6 hours a week that I could use to propel myself forward in some of my goals, and it's working.
I just think that's amazing. And again, you used your planner to do that, to chart that out and to say, okay, instead of having to be all or nothing about this, I either have to be a person who gets up early enough to have more time for my business and meet my goals, but if I do that, I'm going to have to give up this vision for slow mornings with my family. And I guess that's a sacrifice I have to make for this business. No, you're just like, okay, half the week I'm going to get up early and half the week I'm going to have these slow mornings with my family. Simple. But would you have thought of it if you hadn't sat down with your planner to
I would
troubleshoot and
not
work it out?
have, I wouldn't have thought of it at all. I felt like it was this all or nothing situation. But even for at the beginning, the first few weeks, I was able to be like, okay, day after tomorrow, I'll sleep in, and like give myself a
Yeah.
little bit of that motivation. It's not permanent. It's just like, growing on that. And it just really has changed the game with the time I'm able to spend with my kids. It helps me, it gives me margin through the day, and it gave me more time to focus on my home and my homeschooling now that school has started up with my kids. Because I do take summer off with my kiddos. And so now that school has started, I knew something's got to give. And that was just a couple of my sleep in mornings.
That's amazing. I really love that. So right now what we're talking about is, all these different things, right, that you could do in order to proactively solve problems for your future self by crafting this lifestyle that you want to live, by saying, okay, what will my future self have wished that I was doing right now? What will my future self have wished I was accomplishing right now or getting started on right now? And if you're anything like me, your brain kind of blows up with 150 different things that you could answer that question, and you get really overwhelmed because you're like, well, I would completely declutter my house and I would decorate it and repaint it and do the interiors while I was at it, and I would also revamp our homeschooling completely, and I would learn how to sew, and I would garden, and I would do all these, and I'd start another business, and I would actually write this book, and I'd have 150 things just
Slow down.
right, and blow up my brain of like, what does my future self in 5 years, 10 years wish I would have started with today? You take a deep breath, because we have made the answer to this question very simple with a step-by-step process in our Rooted Goals workbook. So Rooted Goals is an acronym, right? And we're going to go through the whole acronym here, but the first O in it is to find your next right step goal that is organically growing out of your current context. And when you go through the Rooted Goals process, you're going to dive into your current context, your circles of influence, which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to the first episode in this season and listen to that. We'll link that in the show notes for you. This is a really important concept. We dive into that because it's about building your life from the inside out and making sure that you're focusing on the core things before you chase goals that need those core things to have been really solid. So we will help you with the Rooted Goals system to take all those different ideas that you have of all the things you would want to change and just say, okay, actually, I'm just going to focus on my next right step goal. And we teach you how to pick it out so that it's so effective that it's like a lead domino that knocks over so many other dominoes. It's so effective that it creates all of this bandwidth in your life to be able to say, oh, okay, well, I want to change this thing now. And then you have this momentum from having just had success with your first Rooted Goal that you tackle another one and you do it again. And the workbook helps you figure out what the next one should be. And you start to get this massive amount of momentum to where you can honestly rapidly change your life using this system. Rooted Goals was the system that I started to develop as a visionary who needed a goal setting system that was based on biblical principles, that sorted my priorities right and helped me figure out what my next right step goal needed to be. But then Clary, who is our co-founder, we started working on it together, and she helped to make it so practical, very grounded in terms of, all right, you're making these plans for the future. So how does this affect the choices that you're making today? We went back and forth on developing this system so that the choices you're making when you sit down with your planner, when you're using your time blocker, are actually translating into moving the needle forward on these huge, big things that you're wanting to accomplish in your life.
Yeah, this is why it actually works for me, is because a lot of goal setting systems want you to dream big, like lay it all out there and have all these big ideas. But this system, it really does help ground all of these ideas and bring them into the context of your life. And I love what her point about the lead domino, because that's why it works so well for me as a task crusher. Because not only are you just trying to solve one pain point, but you solve the most important one, and then it becomes, like she said, a lead domino that then solves so many other problems that you didn't even realize were even there. We see this work time and time again. I just did something this summer. It was organizing a filming area inside my bedroom. And this was my lead domino, and I never would have thought it. I thought it was just a small corner that kind of needed some attention, but little did I know I actually needed a workspace inside my house now that my office is outside. And this was my lead domino, and it changed everything just to have a small filming workspace inside my room. And I just love how Rooted Goals specifically helps you know what this lead domino is. So it's not just that you're solving random problems or you're building out huge, lofty goals. It's both, and you're solving the most important problem that will help you move towards these bigger goals. Honestly, just listen to season 3 of the podcast. Shelby and Clary did an amazing job explaining the rooted goal system and actually giving you examples of rooted goals that they were setting for that season of their life and explaining their progress in these goals or what things had shifted for them. It gives you a really clear idea of this goal setting system and how it could fit into your life. It's a wonderful season.
If you're new to Evergreen and you're wondering, okay, what is rooted goals again, and how is this tied to the Evergreen planning method, and wasn't this episode about self-care? How does this all go together? Let me just lay it out for you so you have the lay of the land. The Evergreen planning method is the method that we use, and the last step of the method is the rooted goal setting system. You use the rooted goal setting system after you've learned the Evergreen planning method. You use the rooted goal setting system every quarter to set goals and just continue to go deeper and change your life. The Evergreen planning method that we teach in our Renew e-course just teaches you how to do everything we were talking about in this episode to prepare you for setting those goals and being able to sustain them, because you've laid the groundwork to be able to set these rooted goals. So we just wanted to give you the lay of the land, help you understand how it all fits together. But if you're curious about setting that next right step goal that we were talking about here, just clearing the overwhelm of like, oh, there's all the things that I would love to do, and you're curious about how does this work? How do I find my next right step goal that is organically growing out of my context? Like McCauley said, just go back to season 3, binge season 3, and listen to all the episodes that Clary and I did on the Rooted Goals system, but especially the one called Organically Growing Out of Your Context. And you'll see how it all comes together and how really understanding the season of life you're in and finding your next right step goal for that season can be such a nourishing thing.
So if you came to this episode feeling desperate for self-care, we just want you to leave here feeling confident that Lord has given you everything you need to take care of yourself through proactive planning and problem solving. It is not indulgent to sit down with a cup of coffee and your planner and proactively plan your day to gain clarity and peace around all of the things that you have to do.